One man is my husband and the other isn't. Tucked in sleep.
It happened as the bell rang, finally signaling a long-awaited recess. But as we got to our feet, another message played over the speaker system. Students of Recall Hall, please remain seated. The school has been put on lockdown. No one is allowed to leave under any circumstances. We all groaned in annoyance, hardly a soul taking the message seriously. Whatever drill we assumed the school was putting us through, none of us were having it. Only then did I glance outside to see 3 armored military vehicles approaching the school at high speeds. Within a minute, dozens of soldiers poured out with heavy equipment and metal plates, running up to our windows. One by one, they started boarding them up, drilling the plates in front of our windows, making any thought of escape impossible. "What's happening?" Leo asked from the back of the class. The teacher didn't answer. He looked just as confused as the rest of us. He went to his desk and pulled out a phone, calling the principal, but he didn't answer. "We're just going to stay here, all right? Let them deal with the situation, then we can leave." I dug my mobile phone out from my bag, only to find that I didn't have any signal. While the school always had crappy service, I'd never been left without the possibility to call out. Whatever the soldiers had done, it had blocked off our only means of contacting the outside world. "I can't call anyone," I said, holding up my phone. The other students, even Mr. Morgan's, pulled out their phones, each of them with the same result. "Everybody keep calm. It'll be all right," Mr. Morgan said unconvincingly. "We just need to wait here for them to help." His words were interrupted by frantic screaming coming from the hallway and heavy footsteps running just outside the door. We all sat in silence, listening intently to the commotion going on outside. Then, one by one, the screams were silenced, replaced by distant gurgles. By then, some of my classmates had started crying, while others sat frozen in fear. "Fuck this shit, I'm leaving," one of the students said. It was Jack, the class asshat. He'd always been a daredevil, claiming nothing could scare him, but even for him, this was ridiculous beyond belief. He ran for the door, pulled it open, and started running down the hall. Mr. Morgan's was too slow to stop him. He just rushed over to pull the door closed. We all sat back, ready for another bout of screams, but they never came. By all means, it seemed like Jack had made it to safety. But how he'd possibly leave the school, we didn't know. "He made it?" Leo called from the back. "I don't know. It sounds like he's fine," another one chimed in. As the news of his escape hit us, more of the students started feeling confident we could get out with him. Whatever the military had blocked the school for, it wasn't to keep us safe, so staying in one place might end up getting us all killed. While Mr. Morgan's demanded we stay back, he couldn't fight us all, so a group consisting of 4 students, including myself, decided to leave. Leo took the lead, sticking his head outside the door and signaling that it was all clear. We ducked into the hallway in silence, making sure it was empty. The place was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to both its usual self and the screaming we'd heard moments earlier. We unanimously decided to head in the opposite direction of the sound, which also went towards the main exit. While we all figured the main exit was blocked, we were hoping one of the ventilation shafts had been forgotten, and the only vent entrance we knew about was situated near the main doors. If Jack had made it outside, that would be the only way. As we walked down the hall, the lights suddenly went out. It appeared that the electricity had been cut because even the ventilation system fell silent, meaning the whole building had lost power. The only light we had then came from our mobile phones, but it hardly provided any comfort. Then, I slipped and hit my head on the ground. It hurt, and as I went to rub the back of my head, it felt wet. At first, I was worried I might have cracked my head open, but then I realized that my entire back was wet. Leo shined his flashlight at my back, immediately gasped as he realized I was covered in blood. The only issue was, it didn't belong to me. The entire hallway was covered in blood. The floor, the walls, and the ceiling. Maybe we should turn back? Elise said. No, we need to get out, Tyler argued back. We kept going, slowly moving forward in silence, until we finally saw the exit. As suspected, the doors had been sealed shut by the same metal plates, but next to the door stood a ladder leading up to the vent, probably the one Jack had used to escape. Tyler rushed to the front and started ascending the ladder. As he got to the vent, he froze in place. Jack? He said quietly. He's in there? I asked. Yeah. But he's not moving. Then Tyler started tugging on Jack's legs and tumbled back as he pulled half his body out of the vent, falling onto the ground and knocking himself out for a moment. Jack was dead, which meant that the monster had either climbed inside the vents or there were several of them. We should go back to the classroom and wait for help, Elise suggested as she stared at what was left of Jack. None of us could disagree, so we got Tyler back on his feet and started quietly walking back, praying not to garner the attention of whatever monstrosity had been unleashed within our school. When we finally got back, we found the door to our classroom broken and smashed to pieces. We stood frozen outside until I finally got the guts to check inside, holding the other back to protect them from what I knew was coming. The entire room was smeared with blood, with chunks of flesh lying on the floor. Every single person in the classroom had been killed, torn to shreds by an unknown entity. Had we not left to look for a way out, we'd all be dead too. What are we going to do? Elise asked. I don't know. We just have to keep looking for a way out. We can't stay here. We turned to walk in the opposite direction, hoping to find shelter, or maybe even an escape through the basement. But as we turned to run, we heard a bizarre sound shatter the silence around us. What was that? Tyler asked with a shaky voice. It was the thing. It has to be. The darkness felt more overwhelming than ever, but we had to keep going. We ran through the halls, occasionally coming across streaks of blood. As we turned a corner, we heard Elise scream for her life. No, help me! She'd been snatched by a mangled appendage that wrapped itself around her leg. It stretched endlessly far into the darkness, belonging to a being that was too far away to see. We tried to grab onto her, but she was slipping away too fast. We could hear the bone within her leg get crushed to pieces as she slipped away from our grasp. Elise! Tyler yelled as he started to run after her. Leo tried to follow, but I pulled him back. Don't do it. We can't help her. Tyler! Leo yelled, hoping to bring him back to us. It was too late. He too got entangled in the many dark appendages, his body being crushed almost instantly under the pressure. They were dead, and there was nothing me and Leo could do about it. So we kept running, turning around corners blindly in an aimless attempt at escape. We'd gotten lost in the vast hallways of the school, and there were no obvious ways out. At least, we came to another set of doors that led out into freedom, but they were locked. Defeated, I just collapsed onto the ground, but Leo wasn't ready to give up. He kept hammering on the boarded-up windows, and in the distance, we could hear the monster come closer. Within minutes, we'd be dead. Then, as he hammered for the last time, the metal panel suddenly vanished, letting light in for the first time. The doors blew open, and a team of heavily armed soldiers came running into the building. They threw something I could only describe as military-grade Molotovs before one of them turned to us. Is there anyone else left? No, they're all dead, I stuttered. With that, they pulled us out and sealed the doors back up. That was pretty much it. They loaded us into a vehicle and drove us to an isolated field hospital set up inside some warehouse. Once they'd confirmed we didn't carry any strange infections, we were put through a series of interviews. But nothing came of it, because the school was gone the next day, burned to the ground, and removed as if it never existed. And the hundreds of deaths were claimed to be caused by a crazy fire. All of it got brushed under the rug. But I can't hide the truth anymore. Even if they kill me, I need to get this story out. People deserve to know. Hey you, would you like to get access to 4 exclusive bonus stories every month? Of course you would. So check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/drnosleep. Just look at what my current patrons have said about the bonus stories. These are just a few of the comments they left. So if you want access to these exclusive stories too, be sure to sign up at patreon.com/drnosleep. You can find the link in the video description. And now back to the story.
This season on Compiler, we're diving deep into how AI is reshaping the world we live in. Join us for a new season of Compiler, an original podcast.
This will be my last transmission. If you're hearing this, please know that I did my best to save you all. I've run out of food, and there's just no cure to this plague. When I die, my body will be located at... Please burn the place to the ground and pour concrete atop of the remains. There's no solution. Please, do not open the door. I'm so sorry for what we have created, but as long as I die inside this building, it means you all get to live. In the beginning of 2012, I joined a group called Sano Project, a bunch of scientists funded by an unknown prospector. Our goal was simple in concept only, to produce a vaccine that would immunize people via aerosol droplets. We'd been given a heap of different substances and pathogens to achieve the desired effect. We'd be using mice for the experiment, but due to the high risk of accidental contagion, we were put into lockdown for the duration of the experiment, which was only supposed to last 6 months. Food and supplies would be delivered using an isolated lift, taking everything we needed underground into an airlock. When we started, there were 6 of us, with Professor Jenkins in the lead. He was an old and equally odd fellow, but he was the top in his field. There was no one more suited for the job, and the 5 of us that worked under him greatly admired the man. Still, outside of work hours, he confined himself to his room with lab reports and an endless pile of books about exotic infectology. Honestly, as much as I enjoyed working under such a great mind, he scared me at times. He seemed overly enthusiastic about the experiment part, and less so about saving lives. For the first 5 months, work went on as normal. We combined different pathogens and tried to create harmless fragments from their protein capsule, aerosolizing them as a vaccine, hoping the mice's bodies would absorb them. It was an endless stream of disappointment, as the poor animals kept dying. Then, at the end of the 6-month contract, Professor Jenkins created something new entirely. While it wasn't anything near what we wished, he'd managed to invent something no one thought possible. He'd mixed a strain of highly infectious virus with a bacteria. It was a miracle with limitless harmful potential, and it terrified us. Still, his explanation somewhat lulled half the staff into a false sense of security. His idea was that the right mix of pathogens, he could invent a virus that integrated itself into the human genome, which then started producing a new type of defense mechanism entirely, something separate to the immune system. To us, it sounded like a ludicrous fever dream, but the higher-ups were convinced by his ramble, basically forcing us to stay under lockdown for another 6 months as we worked on Professor Jenkins' new personal pet project. We followed orders, making countless hybrid pathogens, all in the hopes that it might lead to a cure for all infections. I repeatedly voiced my concerns, but the rest were too afraid of reprisals to take my side. Then, halfway into the second term, the professor called me into his office. He looked unbelievably tired, as if he'd been awake for days. I hadn't seen him much lately, as he'd always confined himself to his office while he did grunt work. "I've finally done it, Carl," he said ecstatically. "A vaccine? But we haven't even started the aerosolized trials yet?" I asked, confused. He chuckled. "We won't need trials. Not for this." "What are you talking about?" "I thought you would get it, Carl. Have you even looked around the world lately? We create cures for everything from basic infections to cancer and genetic mutations. We keep people alive decades past their supposed lifespan. And for what? To finally destroy the planet? To let our sheer numbers be the inevitable downfall of mankind?" He went to the door, locking it before removing the key. I felt adrenaline surge through my body, and though I knew something horrible would come next, I hadn't the faintest clue what. "I've created something that will save us all, but I need someone to start it all, someone younger, healthier than myself. With that, he plunged a syringe into my neck before I could react. I pulled it out as fast as I could, but whatever its contents, it had been injected into my bloodstream. "What the hell?" I started to say before the world went black before me. As I was left unconscious, I couldn't tell whether I had died or if I was just sleeping. It all felt so quiet around me, but also warm. It was an odd sensation, almost as if pressure was building up within me, getting ready to explode. Then, as if no time had passed at all, I awoke once more, lying on the cold floor of Professor Jenkins' floor. He was sitting behind his desk with labored breathing. "Ah, you're finally awake. That means it has finally begun." He struggled to get out between breaths. I sat myself up and looked over at the professor. His skin looked oddly red, with flakes forming from ruptured blisters all over his body. "What did you do?" "I gave you the cure. The only thing that can destroy humanity. My creation. It'll save this planet from us." His head started sinking as more blisters formed on his body. On his arm, chunks of flesh had rotted straight off. He was infected with something, the same thing he'd given me. "Don't worry, Carl. You're the only one that can withstand this disease. That's why you're special. Because you'll be the one that is remembered as Patient Zero." He passed out on his desk, barely breathing. Then I heard knocks on the door, as the rest of the crew were starting to get concerned. "No, wait!" I tried to yell, but it was too late. They'd already barged in. "What the hell happened to the professor?" one of them asked as they went to check on him. It was too late. They'd already breathed the same air as us, which meant they would be dead in a couple of hours at most. Only a minute after they touched him, the first crewman started coughing violently, then the second, third, and before the hour had passed, they were all dying. They called for help. No one came, because they didn't want to release the contagion. I was the only healthy one, which led the administration to believe that there might be a cure in my blood. They demanded blood samples be taken from me, but as the crew fell unconscious, I had to make a decision. If I let any sample escape this lab, the pathogen would be out there. So I did the only right thing. I disabled the only entrance into the lab, putting myself into eternal lockdown. "What are you doing, Carl?" one of the security guards said over the loudspeakers. "We're sending in a hazmat team to save your sorry ass. Open the damn door." "I can't." "You'll get infected," he said. "No, I won't. I'm not going to die from this, but everyone that gets near me will. If I open this door, I'll start the spread to the outside world. There's no other way." But then I heard him cough through the radio, which is when it hit me that the professor had opened up the vents, allowing the toxic air within to mix with theirs. "What the hell is happening to me?" the security guard said over the radio. He was dead, just like everyone else within the building. "Listen, you need to seal down the building." "No, I can't." "If you don't do it now, everyone is going to die." He left the radio, and I could only pray that we weren't too late. Even the hazmat team was coughing their lungs out. They'd been infected before they even came down here. The only one immune was myself, because I was the ultimate carrier. "I locked it down. The security guard said over the radio with his last breath. Everyone died shortly after that. With the building on permanent lockdown, I was alone. That was 7 months ago. Since then, I've been working on finding a cure for myself, but I'm just not smart enough. Supplies have run out, and as I'm typing this, my vision has gone blurry with hunger and thirst. I'm going to die soon. But as long as the contagion remains within this building, it will have been worth it. We were just chilling in front of the television, idly watching the colorful images without thinking too much about its actual content. That had always been our usual routine, to get home, not speak, and just turn our brains off for the evening. But on that night in particular, all of our phones went off within 15 seconds of each other. We all jumped to attention in confusion, checking our phones simultaneously. All it had been was a simple message, but one carrying a crystal clear meaning. Emergency alert. This is a message to the citizens of Newport. Do not leave your homes. Stay inside and don't open the door to anyone, not even your own family or friends. This is not a test. Stay inside. Turn off the lights. Our minds raced, but none of us were able to speak a single word. I looked over at my dad, who'd put on his glasses to make sure he read the message correctly. My mother seemed worried, her eyes filled to the brim with panic. "What is this?" my dad finally asked. While the message was clear, it didn't really explain the situation. It was the first and only emergency alert we'd ever received in our small town. Apart from the occasional test message, it was real. Something dangerous was on its way, and we hadn't the faintest idea what. I went over to the window, only to see each and every one of our neighbors begin to turn the lights off. Within a couple of minutes, the entire neighborhood had turned dark, leaving us confused in a haze of ignorance. "I'm calling the police," Dad said as he dialed the number. It started to ring, and Dad put the phone on speaker. But instead of a person picking up, he just received an automated message. "We're experiencing heavy call volumes at this time. Please, do not hang up. You will be redirected to one of our dispatchers shortly." "What is going on?" Mom asked. "I don't know. This is," Dad said before trailing off. I still stood by the window, watching the empty neighborhood, wondering if anyone would defy the message and go outside. In the meantime, Dad was trying to call the police again. After the third attempt, he tried to reach his coworker instead, who lived further downtown. "Hey, David, did you get the same message as us?" Dad asked. "Yeah, it's bizarre. Most people are staying inside though. A few went out on the street to mess around. Those idiots. They seem fine. But I don't know. Wait, what's that?" Dad waited patiently as David went silent on the other end of the line. "I think the military is out on the street, but they look odd. They're all wearing gas masks, but they have 3 eyes. I don't even know what kind of weapons they're carrying. Can you take a picture and send it to us?" "I'll try. Hold on." A few seconds passed, and another beep could be heard from my dad's phone, signifying that we'd received a picture. My dad quickly opened it, but what greeted us was little more than a tangled mess of colors from a clearly corrupt photograph. "David, the picture isn't showing up. Try again." "Yeah, it doesn't work. The camera won't save the pictures correctly." A loud screech took over the line, shoving us all to the ground as we held our hands tightly over our ears. Though it came from the phone, it was an impossible sound that should have blown the speakers to smithereens in a second. Once the sound had subsided, we could still hear someone frantically breathing on the other end. "David, what happened?" They killed them all. They shot them with these weapons, just shredded them to pieces. All that's is," he stuttered. "David, you need to hide," Dad yelled. "But they're just standing there. It's like they're frozen in place. I don't understand. Why are they doing this? Why are they..." His words froze in his throat. "Oh my God. They saw me. They're coming towards me. Then the line fell dead. Dad tried to call David back, but no one responded. Our house felt dead silent, only interrupted by the intermittent beeps produced by the calling phone. My mom wandered nervously around the house, and I just stared at the window, paranoid that something might break through the door. "He's gone. David, pick up the damn phone."
So long. So I do it so long. I do it so long. Cause baby, you're the only one I'm coming for. I can't take no more, no more, no more. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. Quick, 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 but I like to party. Touch, 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 but I got nobody here on my own. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. Quick, 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 since the day we party. Touch, 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 but I got nobody, so I do it so long. but I got nobody here. But I like to party, but I got nobody here on my own. I wanna, but I'm broken hearted. Quick, quick. Broken hearted. Quick, quick, quick. Quick, quick, quick. Since the day we parted. I wanna, but I'm broken hearted. Quick, quick, quick. Since the day we parted. So I do it so long. So
Tucked nicely.
We can't leave the house. They've boarded up our doors and windows, started shooting people trying to break free. There are things in the streets, tall things. I see their shadows sometimes as they run past the wooden boards. I hear the rumble of their feet. I don't know what they are. None of us do. They cut our access to television and the internet when the lockdown began. They even took out the cell tower. Anne says they don't want us communicating with the outside world, telling them about what's going on out here. I think she's right. It's been 2 weeks since the men in suits came by. They said they worked for government intelligence and that they were looking for a terrorist. They didn't strike me as government types, personally. They looked distracted, spaced out, more like Scientologists than CIA agents. But then again, I've never met a Scientologist or a CIA agent, so who was I to tell the difference? Either way, they said it would be over soon, and they sounded official. "We'll need to search every household," they explained. "We can't have anybody leaving before we've cleared their property, so we'll have to board you in." It made sense, I guess, in a twisted dystopian nightmare sort of way. It made sense all the way up until the end of the fourth night, when the tall things started roaming the streets. They were dressed in long, red raincoats, hooded. The way they moved gave me the chills, all jerky and spastic, so I stayed away from the windows. Anne didn't mind, though. She was fascinated by them. Her and our gun nut veteran of a neighbor, old Ty, exchanged theories written on pieces of cardboard, holding them up to the glass of the windows. "Government experiment," she wrote on hers. "Alien invasion," he wrote on his. At first, it seemed to just be a bit of innocent, morbid fun, finding some humor in a bizarre situation. Then Anne watched one of the tall things kill somebody, and everything changed. It was an elderly man in our cul-de-sac, Mr. Douglas. Anne watched him open his door and hammer down the boards as one of the tall things walked by. He shouted at it, told it to get over here, so he could see just what kind of unholy bullshit his tax dollars were being used to fund. Next thing you know, there's sirens in the streets, soldiers rushing his home. There's a megaphone shouting at him to get back inside. All of it is useless. All of it happens far too late. Because the moment Douglas starts yelling at the tall thing, it starts to twitch and jerk like it can't control its own behavior, like a predator hungry for a meal. It snaps its head toward Douglas, then tears across his lawn and snaps him up in its long, spider-like hands. It lifts him off the ground. Then he screams. He screams and he screams until the tall thing lowers the hood of its rain jacket, and then Douglas goes pale as a ghost. Silent. According to Anne, that's when the skin of his face started to bubble and pop. That's when he started hissing out steam, smoking as his flesh sizzled beneath his clothes, as if he were boiling alive from the inside out. Next thing you know, he's dripping onto the pavement, dripping and dripping until there's nothing left of him but a puddle of flesh and clothes. Nobody tries to step in. Not any of the government suits, not Anne, not even old Ty and all his guns. Everybody watches in stunned silence as the tall thing finishes its execution and saunters away. Soldiers roam with them, soldiers and people in long white clothes. Anne says they're lab coats, and the people are researchers studying the tall things as experiments. But I think they look more like robes, like clergymen. All of them wear helmets with tinted visors. It's as though they don't want to get a good look at the things. After Mr. Douglas, more people on the block decided to make a break for it. Maybe they realized this was worse than they thought. Maybe they started wondering what the point of keeping us locked away like this was. Were we food for these creatures? Were they trying to turn us into them? None of us knew. All we could say for certain is the killing didn't stop with Mr. Douglas. I woke up one morning to see several of my neighbors shot dead in their yards, their lifeless eyes gazing back at me from the grass. Nobody came to pick them up. They were left there to rot, picked apart by birds and stray dogs. Soon, gunshots were ringing out at all hours of the day. People wanted out, but the soldiers wouldn't let them leave, and so the bodies began to pile up. Eventually, I think Anne and I were the only two left alive in our cul-de-sac. Even old Ty had seemed to vanish, probably shot dead in his backyard. It was awful. I'd rarely known death in my life, and the sheer volume of it now seemed to numb me. I couldn't process it. I didn't know how. But then, almost out of the blue, the government had a change of heart. Or maybe they just shifted tactics. Suddenly, they began letting people leave. I saw it first with a house at the very end of the road. I watched the woman who lived there break out with a baby tucked in her arm and a grade schooler holding her hand. The three of them darted across their lawn, jumped over their father's corpse, and piled into their minivan on the street. The entire time, a soldier and white coat stood only meters away, quietly observing. It didn't take long for the rumbling to begin, that telltale sound of approaching death, of one of the tall things coming to claim its prize. The van started up, backfiring a plume of exhaust into the air. I listened as the woman shrieked for joy, but I knew the joy would be short-lived. See, from my vantage point at the end of the lane, I saw something that she never could. The boot locked around her rear tire, The van rode forward as she pressed the gas and then clunked to a stop. My heart broke. The look on her face, the desperation wasn't for her. It was for her children in the back. The rumble reached a crescendo, and in the blink of an eye, a tall thing crashed into the van and knocked it over like a die-cast toy. I couldn't make out much beyond that. Nothing but the sound of the monster tearing into the roof of the van and pulling the crying children out one by one, while their mother begged for mercy. If I were a better, stupider man, I may have kicked down my door and tried to save them, but I wasn't. I was a coward. Instead, I fell to my living room carpet and cried. I laid there and listened as their flesh popped and sizzled, as their skin fell to the pavement in long, heavy drips. It's a sound I'll never forget. The next day, things got worse. The soldiers no longer cared about enforcing the lockdown or even keeping people safely indoors. Now they were breaking them out. Like hungry wolves, they tore down boarded-up doors and kicked in living room windows, then dragged families out onto their lawns and held them there for slaughter. If the screams were horrible before, now they were unbearable. You couldn't ignore them. Anne and I cranked our sound system to the max, but it only served as background static. The dying cut through everything. That night, we barely slept. Anne tossed and turned beside me, while I stared blankly at the ceiling fan rotating in lazy circles. There was an understanding between us. We had been abandoned. There was nobody coming to help us. Nobody coming to arrest these monsters and save the day. We were alone. How long until her and I were dragged out of our home? How long until we became the next experiment, chained to our fence, waiting to be attacked by one of those creatures? Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Neither of us knew, and somehow that made it all the worse. I woke up to the sunlight peeking through our boarded-up bedroom window. Anne was missing. I looked all over the house for her before I found her note on the kitchen counter, scribbled quickly. "I know you're afraid," the note read, "but I have to leave. You might think we'll make it through this, that once they've had their fill of guinea pigs, they'll let the rest of us go free. But I promise you they'll come for us soon. This might be my last chance. Since you won't come with me, I'm going alone. I wish I could have said a proper goodbye, but I know you'd try to stop me. Love always, Annie Bear." She left through the basement hatch. I know this because I spotted her corpse some 5 feet away through our kitchen window. She gazed back at me, a look of shock painted across her pale face, except for the small red dot where the bullet pierced her skull. I couldn't even muster the courage to step out and bury her. Instead, the raccoons and dogs took care of her, one piece at a time. She was right, though. Eventually, they did come for me. It was over a week later. By then, I didn't have the will to resist. I waited patiently at the kitchen table, drunk with a glass of whiskey, as soldiers in white coats dragged me from the house. When I'd seen it happen to other people, it seemed to occur so quickly. Now, it happened in slow motion. I heard every word from the soldier's mouth, every command. First, he patted me down and ensured I was disarmed. Then he told me this was all routine and nothing to worry about. Together, they took me out to my yard. The white coat asked me if I had lived a good life, if I had been a man of faith. I didn't know what to say. Maybe I was simply too drunk. Or maybe I truly didn't care anymore. "It's not as bad as it looks," the white coat assured me. "You'll be at peace once it's over, brother." In the distance came the growing rumble of the monster's feet, of the tall thing coming to claim its bounty. "How many more after this?" the soldier asked the white coat, his hand painfully gripping my shoulder. 16. "Then us, sister." "Then us." The rumbling deepened. The tall thing was getting closer, and soon my heart was beating in sync with its stampeding footfalls. Memories flashed in my mind. Memories of Anne. and my dead neighbors, and the mother who lived at the end of the road, of her children that ended up as sizzling puddles of flesh and clothes on the pavement. My hands became fists. Indignation and fury grew inside of me, stoked by whiskey fumes. "Why do this?" I growled. "Why not just put a bullet in my head?" "Because we love you, brother," said the white coat. "You waited patiently. You had faith, and for that, you will be rewarded with salvation." The tall thing rounded the corner, its legs slapping against the ground in great strides. Its frame eclipsed the moon, casting a shadow across me and stealing the breath from my lungs. It slowed down as it reached my lawn. Then it sauntered over to me, swaying this way and that. "What are they?" I whispered. "The ones that made us," the white coat replied. "Those that gave us life." I shrank away as the tall thing neared, but the soldier shoved me forward. "Be strong, brother. Show it your conviction. We were brought to this planet long ago as an experiment, but now our time is served and we're finally going home. Don't you want to go home?" The tall thing reached up to its hood. As it did, the soldier's grip loosened, and both he and the white coat stepped to the side, away from the creature's view. I would not scream. I told myself, no matter what, I wouldn't give these monsters the satisfaction of my terror. It pulled back on its hood, and something grotesque looked down on me. It was as if 100 different faces had been stitched together, fused into an abomination that seemed to smile from 15 mouths.
"We come in peace,"
it said softly. My teeth bit into my cheeks, clenching them closed. A whimper escaped me. A whimper and a groan as my stomach filled with a soup of boiling horror. I would not scream. I would not scream. No matter the pain, I would not scream. Its long, spindly hands gripped my face. It cocked its head to the side, 100 different eyes blinking back at me. Then it tugged at the bottom of my mouth. No, I wasn't going to let it have its way. My mouth stayed clenched. It repositioned its grip and then snapped my jaw in half, letting it hang limp from my face. I roared in agony, tears streaming down my cheeks in a torrent. It whispered, slipping a finger down my throat. I choked and gagged as it fished its finger around, as 100 different eyes rolled back and 15 mouths began muttering in alien language. I choked and gagged until a gunshot rang out. Then another. The tall thing wheeled around, dropping me onto my lawn as the soldier began shouting into his radio. The next second, a bullet found the soldier in the head. The white coat shrieked, fleeing around my fence as a round caught her in the shoulder. The tall thing shot up to its full height, standing level with the street lamps, and then sprinted toward the shooter. Toward old HAII. He'd set up a kill zone on his roof, surrounded by rifles and ammo. He'd waited for a moonless night to do his business, and now he was raining lead onto the creature like a blizzard of death. "What are you waiting for?" he bellowed. "Get moving, dipshit!" I did. I stole away, hiding in shrubs and behind sheds, watching as tall things came roaring down streets, jumping over houses and knocking over cars as they tried to reach old HAII. He only lasted a few minutes. That's when the shooting stopped. But it was enough time for me to get away. Maybe enough time for others too.
We asked people who said they've had Domino's stuffed crust pizza before to compare it to our new stuffed crust.
That's better than the one they have currently.
Only Domino's has never had stuffed crust before.
Are you serious?
Until now. Introducing Domino's new and first ever stuffed crust pizza. Try one for the first time today.
It took me 3 hours to hike through Debbie Forest and make it to the next town. And once I did, I breathed a sigh of relief. There weren't any soldiers, no white coats. Most importantly, there weren't any tall things melting people in their clothes. Just quiet stillness. The thing early mornings were meant for. I made my way to the sheriff's department to blow the whistle on what was going on. To explain that people were being shot, that tall things were melting people on the street, and that we needed to get our ass in gear and call in the National Guard. No, scratch that. We needed to call in f***ing NATO. But as I got to the door to the precinct, I stopped. Something gleamed in the corner of my eye, catching my attention. It was there, at the edge of the curb, a puddle. Strange thing is, it hadn't rained in weeks. Story 2. Headlights. It started last week. The lockdown, I mean. Before that, things weren't great, but they weren't awful. We weren't the happiest place on earth, but we weren't jumping off bridges either. We just were. We managed, is what I'm trying to say. Now years of impoverished alcoholism have reared their ugly head. The lockdown's done its job. It's kept us safe from the devil outside our walls. But sometimes, it's the devil inside that does the most harm. Sometimes it's the thinking. The thinking. That's what does you in. My town's main industry has been on the decline for decades. These days, most of us are on food stamps. We can't afford to live here anymore, but can't afford to move either. Catch-22. A few years back, the government opened up a compound on the hill, a research facility for military types and the superior geniuses you see on TV. A few weeks later, they announced the town would enter lockdown. Something about a radiation leak. Something about acid rain. Since it started, there's been 1 dead and 9 missing. How'd the dead guy go? If you're wondering, it wasn't radiation. It was self-loathing. They found Benny West near the woods with a smoking handgun beside what was left of his head, and a suicide note so wet with blood that nobody could read the damn thing. Famous last words? We never knew them. But then, I don't think any of us really needed to. You could still smell the booze on Benny's breath. Could still see decades of struggle etched into every line of his face. As for the missing, they're a tougher puzzle. Nobody's found them. Nobody's had any contact with them whatsoever. Not a text, not a call, not even a dusty email. It's odd, but maybe they'd just had enough. Couldn't take this place anymore and finally decided the lockdown was the worst of it. What's the phrase? The last straw. Yeah, that's what the lockdown was for them. The last straw. Since it all started, I've been going stir-crazy. Being cooped up inside with nothing to do but drink and watch TV will do that to a man. I think that's why I did it, you know? Took a midnight stroll. Loneliness is a strange beast, and it doesn't pick and choose its time of day. But if I had to place it, I'd say it always gets worse at night. There's something about the dark that suffocates, makes you feel vulnerable, singled out. So I went to her cabin, my old high school sweetheart, Vannie Williams, the only girl I've ever met that could shoot a target with her eyes closed and still hit a bullseye. The girl I called the love of my life, who left me after 9 years because I couldn't wake up in the morning without a shot of whiskey. That night, I needed her. Maybe I wanted to make amends, or maybe I just wanted somebody familiar, somebody warm who I could feel a sense of connection with. I don't know. All I really knew is I couldn't last another night alone in my cabin. Not with the whiskey, not with the 45. So I set off. The government was taking the lockdown seriously. One of my neighbors, Roger Huckbright, got a lashing from the sheriff for trying to break into the boarded-up liquor store after dark. They knocked out 3 of his teeth and told him next time they'd break his legs. I had a thing for my legs. I liked walking, liked kicking a ball, and most of all, I liked hitting the gas pedal of my truck. I didn't want broken legs, so I stayed off the main roads and stuck to the logging roads. Hell, I didn't even drive. Too conspicuous, I figured. I walked. To the right of me was the hillside, all brush and boulders with a military facility up top. And to my left was the valley, Charmouth Forest. On the other side of those trees was Vannie Williams. But walking straight through them was a death trap. See, that night it wasn't just dark, it was snowing. And where there was snow, there was ice. And I didn't want to risk a sprained ankle going down that valley slope. Not without cell service. Not when the weather called for a cold snap tonight. So I kept to the side of the road with my eyes and ears on. And as I walked, something caught my attention. It was above me, all the way up on the top of the hill, nestled near the military facility. Headlights. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that those lights belonged to the sheriff, holed up there in his SUV and looking for cars on the roads. Too bad for him that I was smarter than that. I didn't just leave my truck at home. I made sure to wear my black jacket and keep close to the tree line. There wasn't a chance in hell he was spotting me down here. Even still, his presence made my skin crawl. There's something uncomfortable about being watched, and even though I knew the sheriff couldn't see me, it still felt tense to be breaking the law right under his nose. I decided I wanted to disappear, just until I got myself firmly away from his field of view. So I slipped into the woods, keeping certain not to stray too far from the road, just far enough that I lost sight of the sheriff beyond the canopy of fir trees. I walked like that for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, kept it up until I rounded the bend in the road, and then I poked my head out and breathed a sigh of relief. The headlights were nowhere to be seen. The sheriff either took off, or I put enough twists and turns between us that the trees were now obscuring his view. Maybe he just figured nobody would break curfew on a night this cold. Either way, it was good news for me. I hiked back up to the road and then froze. Again, I felt that familiar, uncomfortable sensation of being watched, like there was somebody stalking me in the dark. I looked around, but I couldn't see a damn thing. Light blinded me. I stumbled backward, slipping on a patch of ice and falling onto my ass. Ahead of me, near the curve in the road, was a pair of headlights. The sheriff must have been scanning the road with a pair of binoculars to spot me all the way down here. Still, there was a pretty good chance he never made out my face. That meant I could still get away. I shot into the woods. I slipped down the valley slope, sliding over dirt and leaves and fresh fallen snow. I jumped and dipped, doing the best I could to dodge the onslaught of stray branches and renegade roots. I kept at it until my lungs got hot and I needed to breathe. Then I kept at it some more until I reached the valley floor. Breathing hard, I looked back at the top of the slope. If I thought it was dark up on the road, then down here, it was practically pitch black. I couldn't even see the ground directly in front of me. But despite it all, I knew one thing for certain. There weren't any headlights. I took a moment to lean up against a tree, catch my breath, get my bearings. I had to figure out which direction Vanny's house was in. Was it to the north, northeast? The cold nipped at my ears, bit at my nose. It was worse down here. The f***ing sheriff really made a mess of things. I glanced up again, up to where I knew the road was even if I couldn't see it. There wasn't so much as the background glow of headlights. That meant the canopy of trees must be thick enough that even an SUV's LED lights weren't going to worm their way inside or out. My hands found my phone in my pocket. No service. But that wasn't what I needed it for right now. Instead, I flicked its flashlight on. Good. That was better. Shivering, I used the dim glow of my phone to navigate as best I could, spotting familiar landmarks that I remembered from playing in the valley as a kid, and using those to plot my course to Vanny's. A big boulder here, a broken tree there. It was all coming back to me. I was going to make it out of here with all my fingers and toes intact, sheriff be damned. I took a moment to laugh at my situation. Now, it seemed absurd. I'd just run into the dark woods, evading police, all so I could spend a few hours with Vanny. She was either going to love that or hate it. I couldn't decide which. Something snapped behind me. A tree branch, maybe? Something big. I paused, wheeling around, casting my light as far as it could go. I couldn't see anything but the shadow of tree trunks and fresh fallen snow. I knew for a fact that there were bears in those woods. but surely they'd be hibernating by this time of year. "Hello?" I whispered. I didn't think the sheriff had the dexterity to chase me down here on foot, but it was possible he sent his partner after me. "Deputy Marigold?" No reply. Come to think of it, I couldn't hear any sound at all. Not the pitter-patter of squirrels hoarding winter food, or even the flap of birds flying through the trees. The forest was still, silent. Then something else snapped. This time, there was no mistaking how big it was. It rang out like a gunshot and I scrambled, running blindly backwards as my ears filled with the sound of rushing branches, ricocheting off timber as a tree plummeted toward the earth. The crash found me before I could fully clear the way. A fir branch whipped across the back of my jacket, smashing me to the ground and taking the breath out of my lungs. I wheezed, gasped for breath. I rose onto my hands and knees, trembling with adrenaline. I nearly got flattened just then, and I couldn't even tell where the tree had fallen from or what caused it. I stumbled forward. No time to think about that right now. Not when I was so close to Vanny's. Just a little further, and I'd be out of these woods and in front of a warm stove, making those gyoza things she loved so much. It only took a couple minutes for me to calm down. The act of almost dying is enough to throw anybody into a panic. But I'd been around the woods enough to know that they were unpredictable. Nature just did as nature did. There wasn't any stopping it. Sometimes trees fell. Sometimes, if you were unlucky, they fell right on top of you. I carried on for another few minutes when the feeling came back. The feeling from up on the road. The one where I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. I swallowed. My light painted as much as the wood as I could. And from what I could see, there was nobody else down here. No sheriff, no deputy. It was my imagination, I reasoned. A dark forest is the ultimate evolutionary fear. The unknown. The hostility of the environment. As human beings, we aren't meant to be roaming the woods at night. But I wasn't some caveman hunter-gatherer. I was smarter than that. Besides, I could see the other slope now. I could see dim moonlight peeking through the trees, and that meant I was right below Vanny's house. A low groan filled the night. I raised my light, doing my best to peer into the wall of trees, but I couldn't make out a damn thing. "Hello?" I called. "Is somebody out there?" An awful feeling was growing in my gut, an instinct. No longer did I feel like I was being watched. I felt like I was being hunted. Time to get a move on. I shook my head, muttered a "f*** this," and took off toward Vanny's house at a sprint. Snow crunched beneath my boots, and my breaths came out in a great white fog. If there was some psychopath in the trees, then I wasn't about to make any of this easy on them. They would have to work for their sick kicks. A screech pierced the forest. In the far distance, I heard the beat of wings, of birds fleeing en masse. Then came the sound of footsteps. They were soft, barely crunching in the blanket of snow, but unmistakable. Heavy, deliberate. Closing in. I wheeled around and ran up the slope, only to slip on a patch of fresh ice and smash my jaw against the ground. Pain flared across my face. I spit a mouthful of blood and at least one of my teeth while my fingernails dug into the bark of a nearby tree, using it as leverage to get back to my feet. "Get away from me!" I shouted. "Stay the hell away!" I had my back to the valley's edge, facing the wall of dark trees, facing my stalker in the night. I needed to figure out a way to scramble up the slope without slipping and breaking my neck, but I didn't exactly have boots for winter climbing. "I'm armed," I lied, trying to buy time. "So if I were you, I'd turn right around and start walking. Otherwise, you're getting my .45 between the eyes." No answer except the shuffle of feet beyond my vision. Whatever was out there sounded big. A moose, maybe. That would explain the gentle steps and the power to knock over old trees. I racked my mind. What the hell was it you did to scare off moose? Making yourself big was for mountain lions. Loud noises, was it? "I said leave!" I shouted at the top of my lungs. A deafening screech met my ears, loud enough that the pressure of it made my eyes feel like they were going to pop in my skull. I clenched my ears and fell to my knees. Tears stained my cheeks, freezing in the air. Light blinded me. I shielded my eyes, stunned and disoriented as two headlights beamed down at me not 10 feet away. I scrambled back.
I can't help it if I'm popping, see them watch like.
How the hell had the sheriff made it into the valley with that SUV? I barely made it on foot. The lights vibrated, moving closer to me. Something wasn't right. They didn't approach with the rolling sound of a car tire, but rather the crunch of a foot in snow. Not only that, but they were doing things I'd never seen headlights do in all of my life. They were blinking. Something reached out, a long, twisted and gnarled arm that looked like it ought to have belonged to a tree grabbed me by my torso, snapping my ribs like twigs. I threw back my head and screamed. A voice reached my ears, something deep and cold, colder than winter.
Mine,
it said. This is the part where I tell you I managed to get away. That I kicked the creature in its giant white eyes and made a beeline up the slope, never to see the monster again. I wish I could tell you that. I really do. The truth is much worse. Vannie Williams saved my life that night. One last time. This time she didn't fish a handgun out of my mouth or spill my whiskey off of the balcony. She saved it in a shower of bullets up there on the valley ridge. She saved it doing what she did best. Shooting. Hunting. My guess is she heard my screams and came running, looking to help. She probably didn't even know it was me. Vannie was just that kind of woman. Kind-hearted. Warm. I don't know if she knew what that thing was either, but she caught it in the face with at least 6 separate shots. 6 bullets to its head, and it still climbed the slope of the valley like an anthill. 6 bullets to the head, and it still took her screaming into the trees, to God knows where. Now she's another statistic, one of the missing. The sheriff's calling me crazy for what I saw, telling everybody that I'm a drunk, and Vannie just had enough and skipped town like the rest. I know what I saw, though. I know there's a monster roaming these hills, and I know the sheriff and that military base have something to do with it. I know it stole the only woman I ever loved, and I know damn well I'll never rest until I get her back. So I think that's why I'm doing it, going on a little stroll into the woods. Story 3, The Dead World. It happened late. I suppose these things always do. The end of the world isn't exactly a rise and shine operation, you know? It's a big decision, nuclear war. You think you're ready to drop the bombs, but then you figure it's probably best to sleep on it. Then you wake up and think maybe, just maybe, we'll first see how the day plays out. Maybe somebody convinces you not to press the button. Maybe the world gives you a reason it shouldn't go up in smoke like the stock market, like the riots in the streets, like the futures of an entire generation. Or maybe there are no reasons. Maybe starting fresh is all that's left. Maybe cleaning humanity off of this rock is the only truly moral choice left to make. I don't know. All I know is it's been a week since the blast. A week since I ran to the bunker, alone, forced to leave my family behind. If that sounds callous, then just know it wasn't me who abandoned them. They were disbelievers, all of them. They called me crazy for building the bunker, called me insane for stockpiling canned rations 10 feet under the dirt. I tried to explain to them that we were running out of time, that if they cared enough to open their eyes, there were signs that the end was coming. But to them, that was just noise, more chatter from a lunatic. They stuck their noses up at me all the way to the end. When the air raid siren sounded, my wife grabbed my son and daughter and screamed at me to leave the house, to never come back. So I did. I left them there. There simply wasn't any time to fight her for the kids, to fight the kids who were wholesale convinced I was a fraud, a liar. The bombs were coming, and the bunker was 100 feet away, buried beneath the forest behind our farm. I didn't have a choice, you understand? No choice but to run. So that's just what I did. I ran and ran, with tears in my eyes for my family. And just as I closed the heavy steel door of the bunker, I felt the low rumble of the first explosion, then the next. Like I said, it's been a week. I figure the worst of the fallout has dissipated by now. It'll be just the fires that are left. The fires that there's nobody left to put out. Soon, though, once the flames have exhausted their supply of wooden homes and fuel-laden vehicles, they'll die too. And then, the new world will emerge. The dead world. The dark truth is that the nightmare of nuclear Armageddon takes place in 3 stages. The first is what people often assume to be the worst. The bombs, the explosions, the mushroom clouds and the screaming and the running and the sirens. Truthfully, though, that's the easy part. At that stage, you're just afraid or dead. That's all. After that comes the flames and radiation. They do some damage, maybe more than the bombs when you consider the pain inflicted. But even they pale in comparison to the third stage, the dead world. In the dead world, the strings that tie us together are burned away. There are no rules. There are no customs. There is no humanity. It's chaos, unbridled, and hopeless. Raiders roam smoldering city streets, pillaging and raping and torturing for scraps of food. People are rounded up like cattle, butchered and eaten. That, I think, is the stage we're beginning to enter, the stage of desperation. Even now, I hear a band of raiders above me. I've made certain my bunker is well hidden, but it's possible that the blasts have swept away the dirt camouflaging my hatch. It's possible I could be found. In moments like these, I'm almost glad my family perished in the blast. I shudder to think what the monsters above would do to them, to my wife and my daughter. Still, I've covered my bases. The raiders likely arrived to see if there were any animals left alive on the farm, or crops left to reap. They wouldn't be here looking for underground bunkers. Bang, bang, bang! The sound echoes around my bunker like a heart attack. I freeze. Through inches of steel, I hear the muffled chorus of humans shouting, moving. Bang, bang, bang! There's more shouting. I slink to the wall of my bunker, pick up my rifle, and load a round into the chamber. I'm panicking for no reason, I tell myself. I'm making much ado about nothing. Even with a band of raiders, there's simply no way they could break the reinforced steel hatch. Not even with a pair of bolt cutters. There's the sound of something clanking. It sounds like metal on metal. Did they attach something to the hatch? Above, an engine roars to life. Something powerful. A truck, maybe. It screams as its wheels tear into the dirt above, and my pulse races. My hands grip my rifle, raising it toward the hatch, toward the intruders. It shudders. The hatch shudders like it's going to bend. Warp, but instead it snaps cloth. I'm blinded by the afternoon sun. I shield my eyes as best I can, but there's no shielding my lungs from the fallout in the air. I'm armed! I scream, hacking a cough. I'll blow the heads off any of you There's a beat of silence. Mr. Fulton! A voice blares over a megaphone. You're under arrest! Come out with your hands up! You think you're going to fool me with that spew? I snarl. I cock the rifle and let off a shot through the open hatch. Birds scatter from the trees above. Come any closer and the next bullet's going straight through your head. Something drops from the top of the hatch. It's small, oval-shaped, and it bounces on the steel floor once, twice, before rolling to a stop. It's a metal canister. Smoke hisses out of it. I open my eyes and realize I've been abducted, stolen away. The familiar steel walls of my bunker are gone, replaced with cream wallpaper and drab lighting. It's an office building, or at least it was one before the world went tits up. Where am I? I ask, groggily. My head is throbbing, vision still blurry from the gas. You're at the precinct. I'm Detective Veneer, and I'll be conducting your interview. Interview? The room around me is sparsely furnished. There's nothing between me and the liar but a wooden table, a cup of coffee, and some empty creamer. It's a nice set, but it isn't fooling me. I don't have anything more than what was in the bunker, you hear? So you can call your raiding party back and let me go. Why did you do it? I don't reply. He's fishing for answers, fishing for details he can use to find my backup rations buried out back behind the barn. I won't say a word, though, no matter how much I'm gaslit. What's the matter? The liar says, standing up and adjusting his tie. Was a week not enough time to dream up an alibi? It occurs to me that he's gone through a lot of effort to put up this ruse, to pretend society isn't a fractured, crumbling memory. He's even dressed the part. I don't know what you're talking about, I say. The bombs, he snaps. You don't know about the bombs? My mouth twitches. What the hell was his angle? To throw so many competing stories at me that I started questioning my own reality. Of course I know about the bombs, I spit. I've known about the bombs for a long time. Anybody could have seen this coming. His fist hits the table. There's anger in his eyes, rage like I've never seen before. His facade is slipping. How long? Long enough to build a bunker and survive the blast. And your family? My voice dies in my throat. How? I say hoarsely. What the hell gives you the right to talk about my family? Where are they? He's looking for a reaction. He's trying his best to get me emotional, to get me to let down my guard long enough to spill my secrets and tell him about the cache behind the barn. They're dead, I tell him. They died in the blast. The liar, masquerading as a detective, leans over the prop table. He taps his finger on the surface. What blast? He says. My jaw clenches. My hands ball into fists. I want to leap across the table and slug the motherfucker for invoking my loved ones, for cursing me with the pain of their memory. But then he wins. Then he knows he can get me talking with the proper stimulation. I'm not talking, I tell him. No, he says. What blast? I don't know, I snap. I wasn't standing around to count how many bombs fell, to point out which one killed my family. But you are standing around when we opened your bunker, weren't you? You saw the trees, the birds. How many nukes hit your farm, do you think? Must be pretty sturdy bird nests. I open my mouth to speak, but the words aren't there. The liar doesn't seem to mind. In fact, it seems he realizes he's found my weak point. He knows I'm breakable now. He walks around the table, sizes me up, then stalks over to the blinds covering the windows. He gives them a tug. More sunlight. It's blinding again. I hear the sound of a window sliding open, and suddenly my ears are assaulted with lies. A symphony of deception. Cars honking, people yelling in the street, music. Then the world comes into focus, and I see just how deep this act goes. They've set up a projector on the wall. It's a film reel from the old world with its tall buildings, its people walking to and from work, and its cars spitting methane into the air. It took me a week to find your bunker, the liar says, coming back around to his chair. He slips a laptop from a bag beneath the table. I had to comb through your online activity, match up receipts, call the company that installed your tin can. It took some work, but we figured out where you were hiding eventually. I don't speak. Their operation is more sophisticated than I expected. Much more. Let me tell you what happened, Mr. Fulton, the raider says. You fell down a rabbit hole of online conspiracy. You convinced yourself the world was ending, that there were psychic vampires living among us, infecting our every level of society. You convinced yourself that the only way to stop them was to start from scratch, and that our world leaders knew this and planned a global nuclear strike for New Year's Day, 2022. My body is shaking. As much as I try to pretend his lies aren't affecting me, they are. It's poison to my ears.
Chupa Chups, forever fun.
Explore a family vacation that has it all. Family pool, mini golf, cabins, and RV sites. 15 plus activities a day, on-site dining, and so much more. With all of our amazing attractions and amenities, you will never hear the words, "I'm bored" again. The only thing missing is you. Join Yogi Bear and friends at Jellystone Park Lakes region for a vacation you won't soon forget.
You're one of them, aren't you? Bitter too, I bet. There won't be enough food for you psychic vampires to sustain yourselves on, now that humanity is halfway to extinction.
The liar gives me a hard look, then opens his laptop. He clicks around some, types a bit on the keyboard, then turns the screen around to face me. It's a picture of my house. It's blown to pieces. There's barely anything left but wooden splinters and smoldering ashes from the blast. See this? He taps something in the bottom corner of the image. It's a mess of colors, of pixels. It's red, pinkish, and scattered in several pieces. That's your daughter, he says. My jaw drops. A sinking feeling grows in the pit of my stomach, unshakable and awful. Still, I knew there would be horror in the aftermath of nuclear war. I knew. I also knew it would be a necessary price to pay. He taps another section of the screen. The picture zooms in. Over here, we think this might be a piece of your wife's skull, though it could also be your son's. Their corpses are in so many pieces, it's hard to say which hunk of flesh belongs to who. You're sick, I say. I don't want to see this. Put it away. Wait, he tells me. You haven't seen the best part. More tapping, more zooming in. This time the pixels are dark. There's something 30 feet away from the rubble of the house, something gray and familiar. Stop, I tell him, looking away. What's the matter? You set that speaker up, didn't you? Put it right there in the yard? I don't want to be here. This isn't real. It's a lie. All of this is a lie. A sophisticated psyop designed to trick me into emotional vulnerability, staged by psychic vampires to feed off of my pain. Yes, that much is clear to me now. This is too sophisticated for the average raider. Since reality seems to confuse you, Mr. Fulton, let me tell you what happened. The vampire leans back, a smug smirk on his weasel face. You rigged your own house with enough explosive to sink a battleship. Bombs planted everywhere from under the couch to inside the walls. You set it to blow the day the nukes were supposed to fly. Why? That's simple. You didn't want anybody finding any hints about where your bunker was, just in case the ICBMs missed your rural slice of butt nowhere. You didn't want your family above ground, freely able to give away your location to psychic vampires. This is textbook emotional manipulation, a specialty of his breed. I won't let him gaslight me, though. I won't let him feed off of me. He reaches into his bag and pulls out an old book, my journal. Pick this up in your bunker, Fulton. He flips through the pages. Reading through it, you'd almost think you gave a damn about your family. After all, the sirens were for them, weren't they? You set them up to play, hoping it'd convince them at long last that nuclear war was well and truly underway. You hoped it'd convince them to follow you into the bunker, to bury them underground so their thoughts were safe from attack from, psychic vampires. Yeah, things like you, I spit. You gave them one last test of faith, one last chance to follow you into your rabbit hole of madness, and they refused. For that, you killed them. F*** you, I say, my voice quivering. You're nothing but a lying sack of psychic shit. You think I can't feel you probing my thoughts, gaslighting me? I wish I was lying, Mr. Fulton. I really do. The vampire sighs, packs up his laptop, and rises from the table. I feel bad for you, truthfully. Sooner or later, you're going to realize you were wrong. I don't know if it's going to happen when I leave this room or when you get to prison, but it will happen. And when it does, it's going to break you. He heads for the door, grabs the handle, and then stops. For what it's worth, I looked into those conspiracies of yours. Some were pretty convincing. They laid it out in easy-to-understand terms, made sensible links between the vampires, the pyramids, and the moon landing. He chuckles to himself. I guess the only problem I had was that at the end of the day, none of their shit stood up to reality. It only made sense in a vacuum as soon as you looked outside the conspiracy community, as soon as you realized how many little lies you needed to be fed to make the big lies seem palatable. Well, that's when the whole facade broke for me. He grips the doorframe, shakes his head and laughs.
It's more exciting than reality, though. I'll give you that. He exits the room, leaving me alone in his elaborate set. I take a moment to admire the detail in the projector screen, the crispness of the sound system, and the smell of fresh coffee. It's impressive. He went to great lengths to pull the wool over my eyes, but unfortunately for him, I'm not a sheep. I know the nukes fell. I know we beat back the psychic vampires, and I know human civilization is in ashes. I also know it's for the best. The only thing I can't quite explain are the blinds. There's something about the way they dance up and down in front of the projection of the open window. The way I can feel the coolness of a breeze that's hard to explain. Part of me wants to get up and check, just to make sure they're fake. But then I think about how pointless that'd be. I already know the truth after all.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time I upload a new video. You can also check out some more of my animated horror stories right here.
Talked nicely.
I jumped at the loud banging on the front door. 3 knocks, authoritative and unfriendly. I looked at my wife, who sat next to me on the couch. She looked back, the unease clear on her heart-shaped face. "Who is it?" I called out, standing up.
CBD.
A mechanical male voice replied from the other side of the door.
Open the door, please.
I moved over to the window. It was a rainy night, and cars passed by in the sky outside our 5th-floor apartment. Pressing my face against the window and looking right, I could see a police car docked at the 5th-floor service entrance.
What's wrong?
My wife, Patricia, said.
Did you do something?
"No, of course not," I said. "It must be a mistake."
We do not make mistakes, Timothy Derrick.
The voice said from the hallway.
I have a warrant for your arrest. You are wanted for the murder of James Lancaster. If you do not open the door, I will be forced to break it down.
Oh my God!
Patricia said, her voice high and tight.
Who is James Lancaster?
"I have no idea. It's impossible. I didn't do anything," I said, moving through our small living room to the front door.
I haven't done anything!
Open the door, Timothy Derrick.
The voice said. Thoughts raced through my head. I knew that if I didn't open the door soon, things would not go well for me. The bot would consider me hostile and act accordingly. "I want to speak to a human," I said through the door. "I want a human police officer here before I open the door."
This is your last chance, Timothy Derrick.
The robot said. Okay, I said, unlocking the 2 deadbolts and undoing the chain with shaking fingers. I opened the door to reveal a robot with CPD painted in reflective letters on its broad chest plate. It stood 6.5 feet tall on thick, multi-jointed legs with broad segmented feet. It looked like a piece of war machinery, which it essentially was. It only resembled a human in that it had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. But the head was blocky, with a slit for a mouth and 2 cameras for eyes, the lenses hidden behind dark, reinforced domes. It had all sorts of weapons built into its gleaming metal body, most of which were hidden under sliding panels in its arms, legs, and torso. It paused, checking me for weapons or signs of aggression before stepping into the apartment. The bot's oiled joints whirred as it stepped into the apartment. It looked over at Patricia, who was sitting on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. The bot turned toward the television. The screen flickered and then changed from the movie we'd been watching. The warrant for my arrest scrolled up the screen in big letters. Once the warrant was done scrolling, footage of an alleyway came on the screen. There was a figure dressed in black coming up behind a man in a crumpled suit. It was nighttime, and the footage had been digitally altered to make it easier to see. The man in black was wearing a form-fitting mask that continually changed, cycling through different faces. It was quick, moving through several faces in a second. It wasn't like any technology I'd ever seen before. It looked expensive. He came up behind the man in the suit with a knife in one hand. The murder was quick, cold, and calculated. It looked like an assassination, even though the killer took the man's wallet, phone, and briefcase. "What the hell is this?" I said. "That's not me. The guy's wearing a mask."
Our facial recognition AI determined that it is you, Timothy Derrick. You are under arrest for murder.
No!
I said, stepping back from the...
It's not me!
I suddenly realized that my face was probably one of the hundreds the mask cycled through. Maybe the faces were taken from the city's DMV files.
Don't you see? It's a mask! Isn't there someone checking this stuff?
The robot's left arm extended, grabbing me by the shoulder with its large metal fingers. I struggled, but it was no use. It pulled me back toward it and spun me around. A number of news stories popped into my mind as the robot put cuffs on me. Stories about the AI system making mistakes, arresting innocent people. Some of them were sorted at trial, but some weren't exonerated until much later, after years in prison. The police said adjustments were being made, fail-safes to put the mistakes to an end. Just another glitch in the system, a bug to work out. An AI was only as good as the information fed to.
Hit pause on whatever you're listening to and hit play on your next adventure. Stay 3 nights this summer at Best Western and get $50 off a future stay. Life's a trip. Make the most of it at Best Western. Visit bestwestern.com for complete terms and conditions.
I turned to my wife, who was now standing up from the couch, her face twisted in mute fury. Before I could say anything to her, she rushed forward, screaming about how it wasn't me on the video. I don't know what she was going to do. She certainly couldn't have hurt the robot. But as she approached, screaming out with her fists raised, the robot reached out with one arm and electrocuted her with a taser. She stiffened as her muscles contracted, and she fell backward, striking her head on the coffee table, cracking the heavy glass before coming to rest on the ground. I screamed out and fought against the robot, staring down at my wife's body. Her head sat at an unnatural angle to her neck.
What did you do?
I shouted.
Oh, please, no! This isn't happening!
The robot didn't respond. It just turned me and forced me out of the apartment. As we stepped out into the hallway, we passed 2 more murder bots. And as we reached the door to the 5th floor docking station, I heard them knocking on my neighbors' doors, telling them to open up, telling them that they had warrants for their arrest, and that they were wanted for the murder of James Lancaster. Maybe this had been the plan all along. Maybe the man wearing the chameleon mask knew that this would happen, that it would tie up the city's mostly robot police force for several hours. I fought and screamed as the robot forced me outside. There were police cars at every building along my street.
You killed her!
I screamed.
She should not have interfered with police business,
the robot said. I stopped struggling and looked up at the depth of the robot's eyes. I saw nothing but my own dark reflection. I looked so small and distorted, and in that moment, felt the true problem. I knew I wouldn't be convicted of murder. I would walk free with a sizable settlement and a public apology. The robots save lives, they'd say.
Talked nicely.
The PA system crackled to life on a Thursday during second period in my junior year of high school. The familiar tones of the recorded voice filled my classroom.
Lock. Lights out of sight. Lock. Locks out of sight.
The words kept repeating as Miss Dan paused at the board and looked up at the speaker in the corner of the room. Okay, you all know what to do, she said, and toward the classroom door to shut and lock it. Nervous chatter went up among the students as we rose from our desks and moved into position against the wall. Is this real? My friend Colin asked as we sat on the floor with our backs to the wall. Must be, I said. They'd tell us if it was just a drill. The sound of helicopter rotors was faintly audible over the recorded voice of the lockdown alert, and the noise grew louder as we sat there in the dark classroom. After a few moments, it sounded like the helicopter was right over the school. A full minute passed before the helicopter moved again, the noise making it sound like it was going in circles above the campus. A loud bang, like a door flying open, sounded outside. Someone yelled in the hall, a sound that was quickly replaced by automatic gunfire. I slammed my hands over my ears, along with many other students. Some of the girls, and even a few of the boys, covered their mouths as they cried out softly. More gunfire erupted out in the hallway,
It sounded as if there were 4 or 5 guns firing. An inhuman screeching sound pierced the air, making my eyes go wide. I looked over at Mrs. Danbury, whose face was drained of all color. She was the nearest to the door, the nearest to whatever the hell was going on in the hallway. The gunfire stopped, and I heard a man shout and then scream. His wail of pain stopped abruptly with a loud, crashing bang. I didn't have to see it to know that he'd been thrown into the lockers lining the hallway. The metallic bang was enough to tell me that. More gunfire sounded outside, and then more screaming. Then there was silence. For several seconds, we all listened hard for anything outside. The recorded voice was still going, and the helicopter was still faintly audible. The sound of running footsteps suddenly came to us from the hall. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and a terrible scream erupted just before the door to our classroom smashed in. A SWAT officer flew backward into the room and slammed into Mrs. Danbury's desk, which slid several feet from the impact. Cries of fear came from the students around me as they saw the soldier was missing an arm. He'd hit the desk with his mid-back and had come to rest at an angle that told us his spine was broken. Once the soldier came to rest, there was only silence from the hall. It went on for long enough that I was starting to think the danger had passed. Mrs. Danbury apparently thought the same thing, because she crawled toward the doorway where the smashed door was hanging open. I don't know what she was trying to do, but as soon as I saw her move toward the doorway, I wanted to tell her to stop. Still, I made no sound for fear of attracting whatever was outside, if there was anything there at all. She peeked her head around the door jamb to peer into the hall. Her left hand came up to her mouth as if trying to keep herself from getting sick. She stood up and turned around to face us. "Okay, we need to move to another classroom," she said. "The hall looks..." A long, blistered, red and black arm with a claw-like hand darted down from the ceiling outside the doorway and grabbed Mrs. Danbury by the neck, stopping her words. It yanked her out of the classroom before any of us knew what was happening. We heard a scream and a thunk from outside. Then Mrs. Danbury appeared in the doorway again, only she didn't have any arms. Blood spewed from her massive wounds as she stepped into the room, looking back over her shoulder with a dazed look on her face. What she saw there snapped her out of it, and she started running toward the wall of windows opposite the doorway. Fountains of blood poured out of her as she ran past her desk, screaming. A monstrous, scarred figure that looked like a badly burned mix between a bear and a baboon darted through the doorway after our teacher. It leapt, smashing into Mrs. Danbury just as she reached the window. The two of them tumbled out, falling to the ground just a few feet below. My teacher screamed once more outside before her vocalization stopped with a terrible ripping sound. All of us students stayed frozen against the wall, staring at the broken window, waiting for the thing to come back in. We should have run, but we didn't. It was all too much for us. Eventually, the gruesome sounds from outside stopped, but none of us were willing to risk standing up and moving toward the window to see what was happening. Not long after those noises stopped, we heard a flurry of gunshots from far off, likely off the high school campus. Hearing those faraway shots snapped me out of shock. I stood up and moved slowly to the doorway. I looked out to see the hallway littered with dismembered bodies. There was blood all over the place. A man with a smashed head lay below a huge and bloody dent in several of the lockers across the hall. A few other guys and I led the rest of the class out. We headed toward the evacuation spot and were about halfway there when we ran into more police coming into the school. They took us to safety. We were told it was an escaped animal from the zoo. That's even what they said on the news that night. They said it was a bear, but I know what I saw. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't any animal I've ever seen. And the fact that there's a military research base not far from our school is just too much of a coincidence. But those of us who were in that classroom that day are smart enough to keep our mouths shut. But we know the truth. We'll always know the truth. Story 2. Dead all day. Before the lockdown even started, I knew something weird was going on, and I wasn't the only one. It was my senior year, and I had a pretty easy schedule. It was spring, and I could see the end of high school on the horizon. But that day, a Tuesday, my concerns turned from the mundane to the insane. At first, I shrugged off the strange feelings I had. I thought the teachers were just having an off day. Or maybe it was me who was having the off day. I told myself to forget about it until lunch came around, and I went off campus to get a burger with my buddy Tom. "What's up with the teachers today?" Tom asked, as we sat in the fast food drive-thru, waiting to pay and get our food. I turned, surprised at Tom, who was usually about as observant as an octogenarian with failing eyesight. "You noticed that too?" I asked. "Yeah, man. They're acting really strange."
Wayfair's 3 glow-ups for every outdoor space. First, create instant shade in a snap. Next,
Mr. Bemis was just staring at me during first period. His eyes were all wide and blank. It was creepy as hell. Then during second period, Miss Delia forgot how to spell the word algebra. She just stood there at the board, her hand up, with the A and the L written. I swear, she stood there for a full minute before Courtney Miller asked her if she was all right. It was weird. Maybe they all got together and smoked a blunt this morning or something. I laughed at that, thinking about the teachers hotboxing one of their minivans. But the laughter didn't last long. Tom was right. Something funny was going on. "Yeah, Mr. Liu walked super slowly up and down the aisles while we were taking a test today," I said. "He never does that. He always sits at his desk and reads or something while we take tests. And how slow he was walking? You'd have to try really hard to walk that slowly. Plus, I caught a whiff of him as he walked by one time. He stank. He was wearing cologne or something, but I could smell something nasty underneath it." "You know what?" Tom said. "That made me remember something. You know how Miss Delia is always so prim and proper? She's a neat freak, right?" I nodded. I had Delia in one of my afternoon classes. "Well," Tom continued, "she looked kind of sloppy in class today. Her hair was frizzy, her makeup a little, I don't know, sloppy or something. It didn't connect until you said that about Mr. Liu stinking." Our conversation stopped as I pulled up to the drive-thru window to complete the transaction. Then I drove to a nearby park where we sat on the hood of my Camry and ate, enjoying the spring day. We got back to school just in time for class and went our separate ways. About 20 minutes into class, the lockdown started. I was in Mrs. Santiago's class when the alarm went off. Mrs. Santiago smiled, as if she'd been expecting it, which made me think it was just a drill. Although every other time they'd done a drill, they told us beforehand. "All right, class," Mrs. Santiago said. "We're doing something a little different today. Half of you are going to stay here in the classroom like a normal lockdown drill. The other half will follow me to another location. It's something new. We're trying to see how it works." I looked around, furrowing my brow. I didn't see the logic in it. Why would half of us leave the classroom to go somewhere else if there was a threat out there? A few other kids in the class seemed to share my concern, but most of them didn't care. They were simply willing to do what the teacher said. I waited for more information from Mrs. Santiago, but she didn't do anything for several minutes. After turning the lights off and locking the door, she just stood at the front of the classroom, hands clasped behind her back, looking at us with a small smile on her lips. Finally, just when I was about to ask her what was going on,
She split the class in half down the middle, telling those of us on the left side to come with her, and those on the right to stay in the classroom. I stood and lined up with the other kids on the left, while those on the right got against the wall. We followed Mrs. Santiago out of the classroom, taking a right. I was 3 kids behind her, peering around them to watch her, thinking about the strange ways teachers had been acting. She was in her 50s, with hair that had mostly gone from black to gray. She wore a floral print dress with frilly short sleeves. As we walked down the hall, I saw a drop of blood crawl down the back of her arm from under the sleeve. It stopped just above her elbow. A bad feeling seated itself in my stomach as we reached the doors to the gym. Mrs. Santiago stepped aside and opened one of them to usher us inside. It was dark inside the gym because all the lights were off. As soon as I walked through the door, I stepped aside while the other kids walked past me into the darkness. I could hear some of them murmuring. They knew something was wrong. One of the students pulled out a phone and turned on the flashlight. The illumination revealed other people in the gym, teachers, just standing there in the dark on either side of the doors, making a wide corridor in which the students now stood. There must have been a dozen of them, and as the flashlight came on, they moved in on the students. Screams bounced around the gym as the teachers attacked the students with knives and cleavers from the school kitchen. The sickening sound of metal-piercing flesh and blood spilling to the glossy gym floor unleashed a deep fear inside me. Since I'd stepped aside to the wall when I'd entered the gym, I was still in the dark. I stumbled back toward the door, watching in abject horror as knives plunged into my fellow students. Clammy, cold hands grabbed my shoulders. I panicked, throwing an elbow behind me and connecting with what felt like a nose and mouth. The hands came off of me as I turned around, seeing Mrs. Santiago standing there staring at me, her mouth split open and her nose bleeding. I shoved past her in the doorway, trying to get away from the gym, but she grabbed my left arm with her right hand. At 18, I was much bigger and stronger than her. I shoved her as hard as I could. Something ripped, and she fell back against the gym door, but her hand still gripped my left arm above the elbow. I scrambled, pulling at her severed arm, ripping it off of me and throwing it at her feet. I ran, looking back over my shoulder as Mrs. Santiago stood there, seemingly unaware that she'd just had her arm removed, staring at me as I sprinted down the hallway. I ran for the nearest exit through the empty hallways, past dark classrooms. The lockdown alarm was still blaring, but I barely noticed it. The sound of my heart beating seemed louder than any alarm could ever be. I slowed as I passed Tom's classroom, clarity coming into my thoughts. I wanted to run out, but thinking of Tom and my other friends made me think of all the students that would be in danger if I just ran away. I approached Tom's classroom slowly, glancing through the slender window into the dark room. I thought I had seen Tom's 5th period teacher, Mr. Pelham, in the gym. So when I didn't see anyone in the classroom, I banged on the door. "Tom!" I whispered loudly at the door between bangs. "Tom, it's me, Nate," I said. Tom appeared out of the darkness. "Nate?" he said through the closed door.
What are you doing? It's lockdown, man.
"Where's your teacher?" I said.
I don't know. He left like 5 minutes ago. Told us to stay put.
"Open the door. We've got to go," I said. "The teachers, they're killing people."
What?
Tom said, smiling.
Don't mess with me, man. This is serious.
I stepped back from the door and glanced both ways down the hall. I didn't see anyone. "I am serious," I said. "Everyone needs to leave. Come on." Tom reached for the door handle, but a voice from inside the classroom stopped him. I couldn't hear exactly what they said, but Tom's response gave me a clue.
I know we're not supposed to open the door,
Tom said.
But this is Nate. He's no school shooter.
Tom opened the door and let me inside. I closed it behind me and looked into the darkness at the students sitting against the wall. "We need to go," I told them. "Now. Something is seriously wrong." "We're supposed to stay here," one girl whose name I didn't know said. "That's what the drills are all about, remember?" "I'm telling you," I said. "The drills didn't have this in mind. It's the teachers. I watched them kill some of my classmates."
There's something wrong with them. Haven't you noticed anything strange today?
I could see in their eyes that many of the students had noticed, but none of them moved.
All right, fine, I said. I'll go get help. Tom, you gonna stay here or come with me? I'm with you, man,
Tom said, looking scared.
Okay, I said to him.
Then I turned to the other students.
Someone call 911 if you haven't already.
We have, someone said.
They have police on the way. Lock the door behind us,
Tom said to the nearest student as we turned to the door. It was tempting to hunker down and wait for the cops to show up, but seeing what I'd seen, there was no way I could do it. The teachers had keys to the classrooms after all. We'd be sitting ducks. I checked the hall before stepping out. Tom followed, shutting the door softly behind us. We booked it to the nearest exit and pushed on the metal bars to open the doors. They came open a few inches and stopped, the telltale rattle of chains coming from the outside.
They locked the doors,
I said in a harsh whisper.
What the hell is going on here?
Tom said. I looked around.
Let's try the faculty area,
I said, noticing that we were near the admin offices.
Maybe they left one of those unlocked.
Tom nodded. We moved cautiously through the halls toward admin, listening hard and keeping our eyes peeled. We ducked through the doors denoting the faculty area and saw a flickering orange light coming from the teacher's lounge. The door was closed, but, like most of the doors in the school, it had a thin rectangular window off-center through which the flickering light shone. I crept up to the door with Tom behind me. Taking a deep breath, I looked through the window. I saw a figure in the middle of the room staring right at me. I pulled my head back down.
What?
Tom said.
There's someone in there,
I said, then stopped. The image of the figure in the room took a moment to solidify in my mind. I stuck my head up again and looked through the window. The vice principal, a man named Ben Sheridan, was floating in the middle of the room, his legs and arms outstretched to make an X with his body. He was naked, and there was a short wooden spear jammed through his chest. The orange light was coming out of his eyes, nostrils, and wide open mouth, flickering as if from an inner fire. There were also red glowing words and symbols written on the floors and walls of the lounge, pulsating in time with the brighter light coming out of Sheridan's face. He floated just above a glowing circle on the floor, the edges of which were surrounded by strange symbols and words. I couldn't read any of the words because they were in another language, but the symbols looked like they'd been taken right out of a horror movie.
How is this happening?
Tom said, and I realized he was standing behind me, looking over my head through the window. He sounded on the verge of tears.
This isn't supposed to happen,
he continued.
This isn't possible.
We need to get out of here, I said. Now. We moved past the vice principal's office and the principal's office, and past the admin office to the doors used by the faculty. I pushed on one of the doors, my hope disappearing as it, too, only opened partially before it was stopped by exterior chains.
The principal's office, I said. Maybe the window's open, or we can break one.
Tom nodded, following along, wringing his hands. As soon as we got into the office, I could tell that the windows weren't designed to open. I started looking around for something heavy I could use to break one of the windows. I located a heavy teaching award on the desk and picked it up. It was the shape of an apple attached to a wooden base. It weighed maybe 10 pounds. I glanced down at the desk plotter, noticing that it was a calendar. I looked at yesterday's date, reading a note there. Faculty meeting, 5:30 p.m. Something fell together in my mind. I was about to tell Tom about it when he spoke.
Someone's coming,
he said in a harsh whisper. We ducked behind the principal's desk as a figure moved through the hall outside the office. I heard the door to the office open, and I clutched the award in my sweaty hands, mentally preparing myself to use it.
Nate Oshman?
A woman's voice said. Is that you? I stood up quickly, holding the heavy award over my head. It was Christina Henry, a pretty 20-something art teacher I'd had my junior year.
We need to get out of here,
she said, holding up her hands.
I don't know what's happening with the other teachers, but they're killing students.
Yeah, no I said. Tom stood up, eyeing Christina nervously. She looked normal, and she sounded genuinely scared, but I wasn't about to let her near me. Were you at the meeting yesterday? I asked her, taking a shot in the dark. She looked at me with open curiosity. The meeting? What are you talking about? Why is that important? Because I'm guessing that's the last time all the teachers were together in one room, I said. Whatever happened to them, someone did it on purpose. You walked past the teacher's lounge. You must have seen it. I was sick yesterday, Christina said, apparently seeing the logic in my thinking. I missed it. Now, can we please get out of here? Whoever chained up the doors had to be able to get back in here somehow. I have a key to all the exterior doors. We can find the one and get out of here. I glanced at Tom, who looked at me with wide eyes, which he shifted down toward the desk. He was trying to tell me something. Let me think, I said to Christina, then looked down at the desk. Tom leaned down and put his hand on top of a clipboard on the desk. I glanced at it, seeing it was a list of names, teachers' names. At the top of the sheet, it read, faculty attendance, and right next to Tom's index finger was the name Christina Henry. Next to her name, a check mark. I looked back up to see that she had a gun in her hand. I like you guys, she said, dropping the scared tone. I really would have let you go. You're both respectful students. You're not disruptive. I really wish you would have believed me. She raised the gun. I threw the heavy award at her, ducking as I did so. She fired the gun, but missed as she dodged out of the way of the teacher's award.
What happens if... Too soft, too soft.
Tom dove over the desk and tackled Christina, slamming her against the wall. They both fell in a tangle on the ground. Tom scrambled on top of her. She brought the gun up, but Tom caught her wrist with his left hand. With his right, he reached out and grabbed the award, then slammed it down on her face once. That was all it took. Seeing what he'd done, he clambered off of her, as if she were hot to the touch. I stepped over to her and felt her pockets for the keys she spoke of. I found them and darted out of the office.
Where are you going?
Tom cried. We need to stop this, I said over my shoulder. I froze when we got into the hall. I could see through the doors to the faculty area that the hall was filled with teachers. They all had sharp implements in their hands, and they were all coated in blood. They stared at me blankly as they hurried down the hall. I ran toward them, stopping at the teacher's lounge. The doors to the faculty area were about 15 yards to my right. The teachers were 5 yards beyond that. I tried the knob to the teacher's lounge door, unsurprised to find it locked. Trying to calm my shaking hands, I fiddled with the keys, trying 2 of them before the doors opened to my right. I had time for 3 more out of the dozen on the key ring. To my left, Tom came out of the principal's office. "Oh, man," he said, looking at the dead-eyed teachers bearing down on me.
"Run, Nate!"
he cried. I slid a key into the knob and turned it, amazed to find that it actually worked. I'd found the key. I stepped into the room and picked up a chair from the wall just as the teachers crowded the doorway behind me. I stood outside the glowing circle on the ground and used the chair to shove the floating vice principal. I had to put all my strength into it, but it worked. As soon as he reached the opposite edge of the circle, he fell to the ground. Immediately, the glowing lights in his face disappeared, leaving only scorched black holes. The foreign words and symbols all over the floor, walls, and ceiling stopped glowing too. Behind me, I heard bodies falling to the floor. I turned around to see that all the teachers crowding the hallway were now sprawled out. I knew instinctively that they weren't unconscious. They were dead. They'd been dead all day. At least now, they weren't trying to kill us. Behind us, outside the school, the sound of approaching sirens was like music to my ears. Story 3, Hungry High School. History class is underway, and there's nothing more boring. I slide down in my seat and adjust my hooded sweatshirt. Mrs. Blaylock used to give me shit about my hood, but I eventually wore her down. It's not the hood that I'm concerned with, though. It's the headphones in my ears under the hood. There are a few classes where I can get away with listening to music while the teacher drones on. It takes persistence to make it so the teachers don't even try, but I'm stubborn and I like to get my way. I zone out while Mrs. Blaylock goes over World War II. Class is about halfway over when all the students suddenly perk up and look toward the PA speaker in the corner of the room. I reach up and take one of my headphones out, hearing the familiar instructions of another lockdown drill. It's about time for one, I think. We do one every month. I slip the headphone back into my ear. I don't need to hear the instructions. I already know what we're supposed to do. I lean forward and get ready to head to the other side of the room with the rest of the students. A fast-paced punk rock song plays in my ears. Everyone stays seated for another minute or so, and I assume there must be some other announcements or instructions for this drill. I debate taking my headphones out to hear them, but it's probably too late now anyway. I'll just follow the lead of the other students. Mrs. Blaylock is standing in the front of the room, looking like she's asleep with her eyes open. I know the feeling. The students all stand up at the same time, a synchronized movement that gives me chills. I stand up too, shrugging it off as a coincidence. I take a couple of steps forward to head to the wall, but none of the other students are moving. I look over at Jared, who is the only kid in class I can really stand, and see that he's standing up, just staring ahead. What the hell is going on? I think for a second that everyone in class is playing a prank on me, but that would involve a level of preparedness that is unthinkable for high school students, especially the ones at my school. The song I'm listening to ends, and there's a moment of silence before the next one begins. A strange, repetitive sound comes dully through my headphones, and I feel my mind slipping away like I'm about to fall asleep. But it's not pleasant, like drifting off after a long day. It's downright scary, like my consciousness is being ripped away from me. The next song starts, and I snap out of it, coming back to my body. What in the actual I look up at the PA. There's nowhere else that sound could come from. I pull out my phone and open Spotify. I go into advanced settings and select the crossfade songs option, so there won't be any silence between songs. I put my phone back in my pocket and turn my head. The girl that sits behind Jared, her name's Amy, is sucking on Jared's neck. It only takes me a moment to realize she's not really sucking on his neck. She's biting it. She pulls away with a mouthful of flesh, and blood sprays out of Jared's neck, coating Amy's face as she chews contentedly. Jared doesn't seem to notice. He steps forward to Hector, the student ahead of him. Jared raises Hector's arm, then takes a big bite out of it. Hands come at me from both sides, and I turn to see dead-eyed students grabbing at me, their mouths watering. I shove them back and rush to the front of the room. I head straight for the door, looking over my shoulder to see that all the students in the classroom are now eating each other. Bloody mouths chew, wounds spill blood, and glazed eyes stare at nothing. Mrs. Blaylock steps toward me with that same blank yet hungry look on her face. I turn, running into the hall, and slam right into the gym teacher, Mr. Hardiman. He grabs me by the shoulders and ducks his head forward to take a bite out of me. I snap my head forward, headbutting him in the nose. We stumble away from each other. I grip my forehead, wondering how people do that in the movies without getting hurt. I've got a serious headache, but it pales in comparison to the threat of being eaten by Mr. Hardiman. He reaches toward me again, but I duck him and run down the hall. Punk rock plays in my headphones, and I suddenly feel like I'm in a movie with a kick-ass soundtrack. But a glance into a classroom I'm passing reminds me that this is no movie. This is really happening. Everyone has turned to zombies, and they're eating each other. I keep running, heading to the front office. I slide to a stop outside the office door, looking through the window. I don't see anyone in the office area. I don't know exactly where the PA system is located, but I assume it must be somewhere beyond that office door in the faculty area. I push through the door and come to the reception desk that's usually manned by Miss Kelly, the administrative assistant. I rush around the desk and trip over someone, or two someones. I realize as I look behind me where I am on the floor. Miss Kelly, once busy eating Principal Daly, now sets her sights on me. She grabs my left leg while Principal Daly, who is so badly eaten I thought he was dead, sits up from the floor and reaches out for me. I yell and kick and scramble away, ducking into the first office I see. As soon as I stand up in the office, I'm knocked down again as someone in dark clothing runs into me. We both fall to the floor, and I'm ready to fend off a hungry mouth, but the figure clambers up and runs out the door.
I look around the office and see the PA system built into the wall next to the desk. The microphone is bent down to a small digital recording device on the desk. I see that someone has taped the transmit button down. I rip the tape off and hit stop on the digital recorder. I pull out my phone and turn down the volume a little, ready to turn it back up if I hear that weird noise again. But I don't. So I turn my music down some more, and then I turn it off. I hear a high-pitched sound start up, which sends my heart skipping and almost has me pushing play on my phone again. But I recognize the noise. It's the sound of hundreds of people screaming. I step out to the office door and see Miss Kelly and Principal Daly looking at their wounds, screaming. Principal Daly passes out as I stand there, unsure what to do. Miss Kelly looks up at me, tears streaming down her blood-smeared cheeks. "What happened?" she screams. "Help me!" All across the school, students and teachers are pouring out of the classrooms, bloody and missing pieces, screaming in confusion. I can hear them. I step back into the office where the PA is and shut the door for a little quiet. I call 911 and tell them there's been a terrible incident during a lockdown drill. I tell them to send all the medical personnel they can. The lady asks me how many people are injured. "All of them," I say. Once the call is done, I lean over, deep press the transmit button on the PA, and tell everyone that help is on the way. I can still hear the screaming. I look down at my phone again, debating. Making a decision, I turn my music back on, crank the volume, and go looking for a first aid kit, thankful that I can no longer hear the screaming. I don't know who it was that set this whole thing up. I don't know how it's even possible. But I do know one thing. I'm never going anywhere without my headphones ever again.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time I upload a new video. You can also check out some more of my animated horror stories right here.
At Domino's, we're all about cheesy, so you know we had to make our new 5-cheese mac and cheese the crave-worthiest, cheesiest pasta possible. Just like all of our mouth-watering oven-baked pastas.
Talk nicely.
As we entered the hospital, I looked around and saw several families with young children in the waiting area. A few of them glanced my way, and the light caught their eyes, revealing irises tainted a crimson hue. They glowed red like old photos that hadn't developed quite right. There were so many children experiencing the same symptoms as my daughter, Juliana, and yet I hadn't seen anything on the local news. Still, word was beginning to spread around town that there was a contagion going around, only amongst the children, at least for now. The triage nurse looked us up and down, scribbling something on a piece of paper. I handed her the necessary identification, including my Proteon company ID badge, then took a step back and waited for her questions. Symptoms? Red eyes, poorly timed laughter, odd statements. No suspicious cravings? I gulped down a dry lump in my throat, thinking about what my daughter had said that morning at the breakfast table. No, I lied. The nurse gave me a hard, cold stare for a few moments, then scribbled something and continued her questions. "And how long has this been going on for?" "Just today. The red eye started about 20 minutes ago. That's when I brought her here." "Okay. Have her put on this wristband and wait over there to be called in. Don't touch anything. It shouldn't be long." My daughter snapped the band onto her wrist, and it made an electric chiming sound. 2 green lights lit up on either side, next to the Proteon company logo, the mega corporation which ran the high-tech corporate town where we lived. When I first took the job in Pleasant Hills, I thought it was an idyllic, perfect place to raise a family. When the recruiter told me about the salary and benefits, I nearly jumped for joy. But now, I was coming to realize that this quaint little town was not entirely perfect. There was something spreading amongst the population, something unlike anything I'd seen or heard of before. The two of us sat down in the waiting room, and my daughter began to eye the toys and books in the corner. Without asking, she stood up, and wandered over to the table piled high with reading material. "Juliana!" I called out, but she didn't stop. A woman sitting near the book stood up quickly and moved away, as if someone with leprosy were approaching. I felt a pang of anger, but realized I couldn't blame her. None of us knew what we were dealing with yet. My daughter picked up a colorful kid's book and began to leaf through the pages, scanning the print quickly with her red eyes darting back and forth. She seemed to realize the woman next to her was staring and turned her head to glare at her. Then she made a loud hissing sound, like a territorial street cat. She snapped her teeth and lunged at the woman, and I jumped up and pulled her back. "Juliana, no! What are you doing?" She went back to looking at the book as the woman ran out of the waiting room, screaming, "She's got it too!" I looked over to see a man with his daughter and son. The three of them were dressed as if coming from church, but there was something wrong in his children's expressions, something unsettling. They were staring at me with wide, vacant grins. Their eyes were glazed over, and their teeth looked too sharp, as if being drawn out by some invisible force, being stretched into fangs. The changes were subtle, but noticeable. "Yes, just today I began to see the changes. Lord help us. How long have your children?" "Winters, Juliana." A woman's voice called from the door to the ER, interrupting our conversation. "Winters, Juliana?" I stood up quickly and grabbed her hand. She brought the book with her. "I'm sorry. She grabbed it before I could stop her," I said to the nurse, gesturing at the book. The woman looked unconcerned. "Keep it." She was wearing a respirator mask, gloves, goggles, and a bright blue, full-body protective suit as she led us into a room. A sign on the door read, "Negative pressure room." "Should I be wearing a mask?" I asked her as she left. "Probably, but you'd be exposed by now anyway. The doctor will be with you shortly." "Exposed to what?" I yelled. The door sealed shut with a hiss and a bang. The woman stood outside for a few moments, taking off her gear, but made no effort to communicate with us or answer my question. A huge window at the front of the room allowed us a view into the ER, and we watched as she disappeared into the crowds of nurses, doctors, and patients. The two of us were left in eerie silence. Juliana opened the book again and sat down cross-legged on the floor. Part of me wanted to tell her to get off the ground, since who knew what had happened in there? But she looked so innocent for those few moments, I couldn't bring myself to do it. She looked like herself again, like a normal kid, except for the red eyes glowing as she glanced up at me. The PA came on suddenly. A woman's frantic voice began to speak. "Code Crimson in effect! Code Crimson in effect! All security personnel to the emergency waiting area now!" The message repeated 2 more times. Then the speaker cut out again. "What's a Code Crimson, Daddy?" Juliana asked, looking up from her book. "Is it a fire?" "I don't think so, honey. I think this is something different. Just keep reading your story." A shrill scream came from outside the room, and I looked out through the large window into the ER. For a few seconds, there was nothing. My heart pounded dully in my ears, and I could feel it in my throat as I gulped down a dry lump. A woman in pale green scrubs raced past, blood shooting from a fresh wound on her arm, spraying the wall red as she ran by. She was screaming and looking over her shoulder, sprinting like her life depended on it. Gunfire could be heard from down the hall, in the waiting area where we had just been. "Get down!" I yelled at Juliana, running over to her. "Someone's shooting!" I ran over to my daughter and pulled her behind a chair which was up against the wall. The two of us hid behind it, and I heard people running past outside, but was too afraid to look. The gunfire was constant now and getting closer. I could hear things breaking outside the room from stray bullets, and just hoped one wouldn't find its way to us. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Juliana said quietly. "Not now, honey, please." How could she be thinking of food at a time like this? I wondered to myself. More gunshots rang out, sounding very close now. I ventured a glance out from behind the chair we were using as cover. Through the glass, I saw men in black body armor with machine guns in their hands. They were firing rapidly and backing up, moving away from the waiting area. Security Enforcement Officer was written on each of their uniforms, with their name beneath that. I recoiled in surprise as something leapt through the air like a wild animal, tackling one of the security guards and sending him flying backwards, his gun firing as he fell. His repeated screams were heard muffled through the door a few seconds later. It was the children with red eyes. Dozens of them from the waiting room were now rampaging throughout the ER, chasing nurses and doctors, running around on all fours like animals. A few people were on the ground, and the children appeared to be feeding on them, ripping out their throats and feasting on their bloody flesh. The power
It's so long. take no more, no more, no more. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. But I like to party, but I got nobody here on my own. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. Since the day we party, but I got nobody, so I do it so long. Cause baby, you're the only Cause baby, you're the only one I'm coming for. I can't take no more, no more, no more. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. But I like to party, but I got nobody here on my own. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. Since the day we party, but I got nobody, so I do it so long. so low. It's so low. It's so low. It's so low. Cause baby, you're the only one I'm coming for. I can't take no more, no more, no more. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. But I like to party, but I got nobody here on my own. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. Since the day we parted, but I got nobody, so I do it so low. It's so low. more, no more. I wanna but I'm broken hearted. Cry, but I like to party. Touch, but I got nobody here on my own. I wanna